No. Hello, hello, and welcome to Sacred Wellness. I'm your host, Terry Ann Russell, and this is our third Thursday, a little early this month due to our schedules. But today we have Keegan on the podcast. Hi, Keegan. Welcome to the show.
Hello, hello. As always, pleasure.
I love
Pleasure.
having you here. We dive deep into these conversations, which are really so helpful and so needed. And we get such good feedback when we're together. I love sharing this space with you.
Agreed. And every conversation with you is a deeper conversation with myself. So it's always reflection.
Absolutely, absolutely. So today we are talking about one of the most profound experiences that you can go through, awakening and ego death. This isn't just a conversation today, it's going to be an activation. It's going to touch something within you and open you up to a new expansiveness. If you've been feeling like your world is shifting, then this episode is for you. I've experienced several ego deaths over my lifetime, and I know Keegan has too. And we're here to share our experience today. But it's not only talking about how it impacts us, we're going to talk about how it impacts your personal relationships. And when you go through something like this ego death, how really something within you does die, and the things that you put up with before are no longer acceptable to you. I want to know, Keegan, when we're breaking it down today, what did your awakening look like, and how did you know that you were going through this sort of ego death?
Well, I agree with you 100%. I've been through many in my life. I didn't know that that was going on in consciousness until much later in my years. I would say year 33, that ego death really um solidified what it is and how you can consciously move through it instead of just being a victim in it. But prior to that, I definitely had ego deaths within my life through situation, relationships, travel, all kinds of things that trigger these awakenings. But I wasn't conscious of it, I would say, until 33. But it really solidified my belief in spirit going through an ego death, and it really solidified my belief in reincarnation, because I saw for the first time that I have died and have been reborn in this life alone so many times that there's no way the soul has it as well through many lives.
I love that you share that, because I think it's so important. When we think about death, we think about it as this finality and it's the end. And I know before Anthony passed, I had that same idea, is that this was all there was, and then he died, and then you go on and that's it. But once he died, and then I started experiencing my own ego death and what that looked like for me. And so I was much older than you. I'm sure us also, I went through it previously. I remember saying, before I was awakened and awake, I remember saying, like, every 5 years I would sort of shift and change what my thinking, my values, my beliefs were, not actually knowing or being able to put a word to what that meant.
Exactly. And I think that the Trinity really comes into play when that consciousness comes in, that mind, body, and soul, because you realize all three of them whisper together until they scream, and they will move you. And if you ignore it, it makes it 10 times worse. But if you embrace it and you navigate it with an open heart and you navigate it with grace, because you have to give yourself grace, then I think that there's a lot of magic in it, because every time something dies, something else is reborn. That's the natural occurrence of life, right? So it's the thing for us, and we can kind of not control, but be the pathfinder in that rebirth, instead of just kind of like bouncing off the walls and then creating another ego that has to die.
It is definitely not a journey for the weak, right? I mean, when I look back at it's funny because we are also like self-individualized, right? We look at ourselves and we think, my gosh, I must be the only one who has experienced this. Or how many times do I have to go through this to actually learn what I'm supposed to learn in this process? And now here we are, and we're meeting all these other people in our soul families, and we're like, oh, that happened to you too? Oh, it wasn't only me. You had that happen as well. And so I think having a platform like this and sharing this space with you today, I mean, it's so beautiful to be able to reach so many different people.
Agreed. And I believe that I met you around my 33rd year, like in the present. And I think that it was confirmation on the other side of things, because not um, it's not only about what you lose in an ego death, it's what you gain too, and what doors open up because you're letting go. And when we close doors and we let go, it allows room for new things and it allows open doors for things. And sometimes I think when you are consumed in it, in the grief of it, because you do have to grieve, I think you're only seeing loss, and then certain things will happen in your life along the death, and certain people will come into your life. And then when you do have the consciousness of it, of what it was, looking hindsight, you're like, wow, they were gifts, or they were angels, where I was getting rid of demons. And that's metaphorically. You don't have to believe in angels and demons, but just the idea of every darkness that you shed light on allows for a new presence to come in. And it can be a physical present, or it can be the presence of self in another,
Yes.
And I think that was the most beautiful part of that conscious awakening. But I would say year 33 of my life was the catalyst and the absolute hardest transitions and times in my life. And I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me in all aspects of my life. Like there was not one part of my life that was not being affected. And
Yeah.
I think that, looking back on it, I'm so grateful for it. But man, I am really surprised I made it out the way I have.
I love that. I love it. I want to talk a little bit about what awakening really means, because it is this big spiritual buzzword that people throw around today. Oh, I'm awakening. I'm awakening. And awakening isn't about becoming, right? And it's not about something that happens overnight. It's not like you wake up in the morning and you go, oh, I'm awakened. Here I am. Everything is easy. Because as you just shared, it was not an easy process for you. Most of the time, it's not an easy process. So it's really about remembering who you are beneath all this conditioning. And as this conditioning comes up, it's almost like, for me, it was like an existential crisis. All I had identified with my entire life. And I think so you were 33. I was 52, I think, 52, almost 53. And so I was experiencing this existential crisis about everything I'd known up to that point had been a lie. It just like hit me in the face one day. This entire life, 52 years of mine, has been a lie. And so that's sort of unraveling. And that conditioning comes to the forefront, and it requires us to look at that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that more, but I want to know from you. Often we learn about where we're lacking, where we don't give to ourselves enough, where we're not setting our boundaries, where we're not living in our worth. What did that look like for you when you started to unravel what this awakening was for you?
Anger. At first, it was a lot of anger, and it was a lot of abandonment, and it was a lot of holy shit, I did this to myself. And that was a really hard pill to swallow. And I think once I swallowed that pill, I realized that, like you said, it isn't like a becoming of something. It's actually a stripping away of something. Because in order to become, you have to navigate everything. You have to navigate all the lies. And it was lies in my marriage. It was lies in my life, my career, the persona I was living, the idea of being a daughter, the idea of being a mother, the idea of being a wife, a friend, and like what all of these things really meant, and what, I was providing and not getting in return. And it wasn't like a selfish thing. It was like, hey, I really am like in a fragile position right now, and there's no one available. There's nothing. It's only me. And that is a really, really hard thing to deal with, especially when you're a new mother. Cause I think Olivia was 5 at the time, 4 maybe. And I was already, dealing with that. And then just being a military spouse and like all of these conditions that I was living under, because I don't even want to say personas, because they were conditions, or titles that we give ourselves or allow ourselves to be associated with. And when we have all these titles, we're never asking ourselves what we truly are or what we truly want and how we truly feel, because it's living under these titles. And I think it was the stripping away of that was like, like I really could have clawed my skin off in some points. There was so much just anger and rage. I just wanted to burn it all down. And now I realize that's normal because it was the burning of it all down.
And it's no coincidence that that's at the time that we both met.
No. And
That's
basically
so
you gave me the
profound, isn't it?
permission. I know. And like, I never had the permission, you know what I mean? Of somebody to be like, I got you. I understand completely. And you have full permission. Like, it's your life. You're the captain of your lifeboat. You are deeply connected to your soul, your spirit, and only you can answer the call, you know? And most people will just tell you to put your big girl panties on and truck through the mud, not that you have permission to tear it down. And I think as women and as people, we're so afraid of death. So it makes complete sense for us to, avoid an ego death. But man, when you go into it full force and your head in it, it's dark, but it is so rewarding in the end. And you feel so strong and so powerful. And you navigate your life completely different after that.
It's a process, and I like people to see that it's a process. It does feel very painful when you're in it.
Yeah.
A lot of times it feels like you're the only one, your world around you, the world that you've known is falling apart. So in many ways, that false self, that role that you've played for so long, that role you've identified with, that doesn't exist. And you realize that it never existed. It was just a role that you played for the people that you thought that's what the role you needed to play it for. And these identities and labels. And so for me, it was like it was being pulled off of my body. I could see the words and see, I identified always as the strong one. So if I wasn't the strong one, who was I? I was denying myself because I didn't want to be the strong one anymore, but everybody believed I was the strong one. So this whole illusionary part of the ego is that you are this persona and you portray it to people and they expect you to just go out there and do that. But this dismantling comes. And I love that you and I share this because I think often there's not enough talk about the sacredness of this dismantling. We don't give ourselves the permission to be angry, to yell, to scream, to rage, to be able to go through that because, hey, I know I wasn't going through and go, oh yeah, this is great. Let me just go through this. It'll be wonderful. I was like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. How could
crying on the bathroom floor for hours at 1 o'clock in the morning? Like, I am losing my damn mind.
What's wrong with me? Why am I the only one going through this?
Yeah, like, why can't anyone see this? Like, what is happening?
Yeah,
you really do.
It feels like that's the space. I think, a lot of things on a spiritual path lead us to believe that it's this easy space to enter. But this is the space where grace really enters for you.
Yeah.
And it's that faith and that trust. And you go through this process. And it's like that unraveling allows you to then become this place of peace, this place of essence, this place of unapologetically you. And I think that's what we want to really stress today in today's show.
And that the isolation is necessary. Because you have to remove the voice of everyone else. You have to remove the voice of society and the voice of your surroundings and all of these things that bind you from opening your wings. So the hardest part was the isolation for me and the like raw truth of that. And how like now it's so necessary that I choose isolation when I want to hear myself again. I choose isolation when I need to align and recenter. Yeah. Where before I was terrified of it. Isolation meant I had to do it on my own, even though I could, but I never accepted that I was alone, but I was.
Now I choose Yeah, and now you choose it. And so I want to talk about that because I think the advice that we give people today is really deeply entrenched in our experiences. And I know that we're not the only one who've experienced this sort of surrender and trust. Those are other words that are also thrown around very easily in the spiritual community. Oh, just surrender, just trust, it'll be great. But doing that, walking through those trenches of surrender and trust, and I think that's also a layering or an unlayering of a process, because how I surrendered previously is not how I surrender now. You want to talk a little bit about that? What kind of advice would you give somebody that's really going through this deep unraveling of how they were, who they are, and what they're becoming?
I first want to say that used to really make me mad when people would say, just surrender. Don't resist. Don't resist it.
Why are you fighting it?
I'm like, I'm not freaking resisting. But that used to make me feel even more alone. And I realize now that, like I said, it's necessary. But surrendering means letting go of, I cannot do it. I can't do it all. And it can be something as simple as, if you're carrying the mental load for everything, let's just say in your life, if you're carrying the mental load for everything, it's literally letting go and saying, I am not going to think about that today. I'm going to do something for my mind today to let it go. And I'm going to trust, and I'm going to surrender to the fact that I can't do it all. Doing it all is breaking me. It's breaking me. And if I'm broken, or I have a mental breakdown, what happens to everything else around me? So if that's the path that I'm going towards, I'm just going to choose it in this moment. And I think choosing is surrendering. I think choosing is not resisting. I think when we decide not to choose and just go with the flow, when we already know the flow is leading to a freaking waterfall, you are resisting.
Yeah.
Because you're creating more of a shitstorm for yourself. You really are. So I thought surrendering was just succumbing to my circumstances, when surrendering was choosing in the circumstance.
I love
Choosing
that.
what was going to be best for myself in the future and for now.
And that is such a powerful place to be. I know my generation, we were taught a lot of, you can do it all. You're a woman, right? You can do it all. And I was always like, well, what if I don't want to do it all? What if I don't want to be that person that does it all? What if I don't want to be exhausted? And I did it for many, 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 many years at the expense of my own self. And I think I'm always brought back to the analogy. Do you know that analogy? Like when you fall and you trip on something, you're going to break something, right? But the more you resist, the worse the injury is from the fall. The more you like, okay, I'm falling, let me let go, the easier it is through that process, because your body is not resisting that. And I think it's the same thing, honestly. We go through these processes and these unlayerings, and it is painful. But if you're choosing to be in a space of awareness, and that's another word thrown around often, I'm sorry to use it again, but the awareness of it, right? Because once we become aware, we can understand that we get a choice in this. I didn't never think I had a choice. I thought I had to be the strong one, the one who did it all, the firstborn Italian Catholic daughter that would lead the pack, right? And so those ideals, it sort of created this disconnection. And
we are definitely fed in our society that you reap what you sow, and that your choices are your choices and things like this. And we're never taught that you can change your mind and you can go redo it, and we coming from also a first generation immigrant family, strong devout Catholics and things like that. It was like follow through. Everything was follow through. You don't quit. You don't give up. You don't quit. You don't start over. You follow through. And it's so toxic and it's so debilitating to actually think that way, because you then deal with so much more than your heart and mind would ever truly deal with. When you should have been encouraged to change. You should have been encouraged to, if this doesn't feel good, then I'm going to navigate towards what does feel good, or I'm going to eliminate that because I don't know what feels good. And that is the most important thing. I think in this society, it's such a heavy burden to carry about choice and dealing with your choice and making the bed you lay in, or whatever that saying is. You
Oh,
sleep in
that's a
the bed.
horrible one. I hated that one. You made your
Exactly.
bed, now lay in it. Oh,
Right. And it's like, you're right, I did make this bed, but I can also rip all the damn sheets off and put a new comforter on because it is my bed.
I
And,
can redo that.
yeah, and that is the hardest part to surrender to, because then again, it's your control. And sometimes it's so much easier to give the control to someone else or something else. And
Yeah.
then you don't have to surrender to the fact that you can change it. And you don't have to surrender to the fact that you created it. Because it was a huge thing for me. And not that it's hard for me to go back, because I'm the first person that I'll say I made a mistake, and let's rectify this, or I change my mind because situations happen in life or things happen that gave me a different perspective. And that's part of life, and that's part of changing. It's when we try to hold on to this ideal because you're afraid of what others might think of you, or you're afraid of what you might think about yourself,
Mhm.
that we create these egos. We
Yeah.
do. We
The
create a lot of
ego.
ego protection too.
Yeah, the disillusion of the ego. And I think the ego is multifaceted, multi-layered as well. And there's many different things that create the ego in the first place, from childhood, from past experiences. And we bring it all into this one person or personality now that is going to grow through this opposition. And at the time, I remember being in the opposition was something that I totally just lived in. It was like my entire life
Yeah,
opposition.
me too.
I was like the poster child for opposition. I don't like authority. You tell me to do it, I'm definitely not going to do it. Or you tell me don't do it, and I'm definitely going to do it. And today, being on the whole opposite end of the spectrum of that is so different for me. And you and I talk about our daughters a lot. And something just came in the other day when I was preparing to do this show, but I was like, I really wonder sometimes, because we talk about how we experienced our life and how we raise our daughters differently. And then, but we're not fully healed. So I was like, okay, so will our daughters then be the ones that are fully healed, right? Because we're still healing and we're still in this process. So we still carry, sometimes I hear my mother's voice come out of my mouth, and it's
Yeah.
out of my mouth before they say it, because I'm not healed, right? I'm working through that process. And so I was sitting there thinking, I was thinking about this show, and especially in today's world, I want to know, because when we stand in our truth, it means standing in our truth fully and completely with no facade. And we are not healed. I mean, that's something you and I share often, is we are not healed. We are healing. We make mistakes. We go through this process of being a mother to these beautiful children that are going to bring the work forward later on. And I think when we take that onus of we have to do it all right off of ourselves, there's another way, there's another unlayering that comes through, right? You feel that?
Yes. Um, year 33, like I said, was a catalyst. And then it was a rewiring and a stripping of myself for a good 5 years. That ego death from 33 to now has been a process. And the most important part of that process is remaining human to my daughter. And I tell her all the time, I'm not your owner, I'm your protector. I've never been here before. I've never navigated this before, and neither have you. This is your first time being my daughter. I don't know if I was your daughter in a past life, but this is your first time as a woman here on earth, as a little creature here on earth. This is my first time as your protector and your vessel of life, basically. So we are going to make mistakes together. What's most important is we love each other through it. We don't hold on to those mistakes. We hold on to the love around it, and that we encourage each other to try again. Like, we just had an argument this morning because we were almost late to school. And, she said, I'm sorry, Mom. And I said, why are you sorry? You're not a sorry human being. You just made mistakes. So did I. We have to fix them, and we have to fix them together. We don't have to be sorry. Sorry
Yeah.
means you made a mistake that you cannot fix. Sorry means you've done something that you can't return on. We're not sorry people.
Yeah.
We are aware people. And so we're going to navigate this together. We're going to change this together. And I think that if I continue to have this kind of relationship with her, then she will navigate the world differently too. She won't be afraid to make mistakes. She won't be afraid to change. She won't be afraid to help someone else change. And she won't be afraid to say no.
I think that's a
Because there's
huge
no shame
one.
in it.
No is a huge. We were never allowed to say no. No didn't
No.
exist. You were never allowed to say no. And so I think, and it's funny because when the older generation sees our children saying no, they view it as disrespect. I don't
Yes.
view it as disrespect. I think, wow, my child really knows herself, because she'll say,
Yeah.
this is making me uncomfortable. This is not something I want to do.
Yeah.
And I always tell her, you have the ability to say no. You have the ability.
Go. That's not someone I want to be around. I don't trust this person. And I
never
protect
question that.
that. Yes, I protect it. And I give it a platform, basically. And that is very irritating to people. And I have lost people along the way. I'm still losing people because I choose truth. And the truth is, I'm not her owner. I'm her protector.
And you're here to teach her with you were not taught.
Exactly.
As uncomfortable as it is.
Yeah, just like I'm not the owner of my soul. I'm the protector. I'm the Merkaba of this life. What this soul is going to continue to do and what this soul has done before is not in my control.
I can attest to that.
Yes. And that is something too, like we separate ourselves from this, or we give ourselves this ego as if we are in control. And there are parts that are absolutely not. But the parts that you can control, you should be going into very consciously.
Yeah. And the ego is very fear driven, right? Let's be honest. When I took psychology class, the ego is about protection, right? The ego is not always there just to keep you small, but it's there to protect you. There's a reason that it's there. There's a reason that we have this navigation within us to be scared of a bear that comes up on us. You know, it does serve a purpose. But when it gets in the way of everyday life and it tries to keep you small and safe in everyday instances, that's the ego that we're talking about. I want to talk a little bit about how we can help our audience integrate this wisdom into their everyday lives. And because often we have to become the observer. We have to observe what we are doing on a daily basis, where we are sacrificing ourselves, where are we making decisions that aren't really aligned with who we are because it makes someone else happy.
Exactly.
So I want to talk a little bit about how do we invite someone to become that observer, to give themselves self-compassion? I think one of the hardest things and lessons that I learned, I was very good at giving compassion to other people, but to give it compassion to myself was a very difficult lesson for me to learn, that I'm still learning and going through, to give myself time and compassion. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can sort of help everyone integrate that lesson into their everyday lives.
Documentation. Whatever that means to you. It can be as simple as putting a smiley face and a miserable face on a calendar every day. And, was this day predominantly, miserable? Was this day predominantly happy? What did you do in that day that, that you felt like you could put a happy face? What did you do that day that felt like you couldn't put a happy face? Did it involve work? Did it involve family? Did it involve, a role you're playing? Does it involve a lie you're telling yourself? Because most people walk out their front door and they are a completely different facade than who they are at home. And you have to get real with yourself. And it's one of the hardest things. You have to look in the mirror and you have to get real about yourself. And you have to really document your triggers. And that's another word people throw around. But you have to see like what is irritating you, what is causing you grief, what is causing you sadness, what's causing you madness. And, we're talking about fear and we're talking about the things that make us small, but we can also create egos around power too. And we can hurt people. And we can then feel very shameful when we come home later or when we reflect later, or we can not feel good about the power that we've had to instill based on an ego. Because there's some people in jobs and roles in their family that they have to be the powerful one, and they don't like it. They don't want to make choices for other people.
Yeah.
They don't want to be the powerhouse in a situation. And that creates a lot of internal shame, and that creates a lot of internal worthlessness. And so it can play on either side. But documentation, I think, is the number one place to start, because it allows you, like you and I said on the last show, that it allows you to say, hey, I'm not making this up. Look, I can see it.
Yeah.
And we need that. We need that first. We need to see it to believe it.
And, you know, to add on to that, it's like also, yeah, I'm seeing it. And what feelings is that bringing up about it? Because if you are a person that maybe seemed to be very quiet as a child and you were raised in a family that's very controlling, for you, that's very natural, right? So you don't know any different. I know when I first married my husband, he was controlling. I thought that meant that he loved me. Naive as I was, I believed that meant that he loved me because he wanted to know what I was doing and where I was going. And so I had all those beliefs surrounding that. And not until much later, obviously, did I learn what that actually meant. And it's like I needed to be controlled because I wasn't worthy. I couldn't make good decisions for myself, right? So somebody had to control me. And so when you're unearthing these feelings, these emotions, these things that are going on as you're going through this ego death, you're going to start to see some patterns in your life. And these patterns have existed from when you were a child until now. And yes, they may shift and change a little, but mainly the experience behind that is usually one to do with worth. Are you worthy enough to make your own decisions? And I think when you're stepping in, looking into that, right, and you're connecting with other people who are like us or in your group, in your community, you're realizing it's not such an isolated experience. It wasn't just you not being able to make good decisions, but there's many people that are raised similarly to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many people that are not going through ego deaths, or they are, but they're victimizing themselves in it. So they're not consciously changing the parts that they can, you know what I mean? And so when you talk about controlling and stuff, a lot of this comes too from not being able to release the idea that we're somebody's daughter or son. When I got down to the nitty gritty, like that's what it was. I had to take off this container, like, Keegan, you're an adult. You are running a household like an adult. You make decisions as an adult. You know, these people that are older than you, or these authority figures, you know, should not make you feel like a child. You're not a child. That is an ego inside of you that has to die. You don't have to, you know, be at the beck and call. You are a human, you are an adult, and you are making and navigating the world just as they are. And as simple as that, like it's changing the dynamic of how you think, and it's giving yourself grace in it. And when I say give yourself grace in it, it's saying like, hey, seeing this pattern in myself is actually a gift, because now that I see it, I can change it. Now that I see it, I can navigate it differently, and I can apply little things here and there to shift this behavior or shift this mindset. And just saying thank you instead of I'm sorry changed a lot. And I started that with myself. I would say, thank you, Keegan. Thank you for making that mistake so that I could see that this is a mistake that needs to be fixed. Thank you for making that choice, because now we can never make that choice again. Thank you for this breakdown, because I'm going to feel this, because I never want to feel like this again. I never want to be in this position again. So thank you.
I think you make a valid point, because how many of us go home, and especially with the holidays approaching, right? We go home, yet we're treated like children still.
Yes.
And I think there's a misconception that we're doing our work. Well, we can't change other people. We can't make them treat us differently. No, but the choice is or within you, you're going to make the distinction. You're going to see it more clearly. Does that make sense? Like, you're going to go home and go, look, I'm not a child. I don't need to be told what to do. I don't need to be told how to raise my family. I don't need to be told I can't do this and that because I make poor choices, right? And so you're going to see the distinction. And that's when you're going to start to set the boundaries that you need to set that haven't been set before. And maybe in some instances when you're a child, that was necessary for you. But now as an adult, you realize when you go home, that's not where you are anymore. That's not who you are anymore. And so those roles have to switch and change. But we're not going to change anybody else, right? We're not going to change our parents into believing something different than they've believed, for 70, 80 years. And so I think it begins with us and understanding that we're going to go home and there's going to be the difference of who we are now and what we are willing to accept.
And it's also identifying the ego that you may have held outside of you now. I think it's a thin line to play. But sometimes you can like see the ego in which someone else is living once you have identified it in yourself, and then when you can identify the ego or the self that someone is living in or the character that they're playing in a scenario, then you can navigate that then differently. Something I struggle with my mom is she does that sometimes where she definitely wants to control the situation or she has an expectation because I'm her daughter. And it's like, do I really need a mom at this point in my life? No, I don't. I need a friend. I need honesty. I need truth from the one that has lived it 20 plus years before me. I want to know you. I want to know you as a person. What do you love? What do you hate? What are you afraid of? What are your deepest, darkest fears and secrets and things like this? Because we're women now. We don't have to play this role. You don't feed me, finance me, or F me. So where can we break this down so that I don't have to play in this ego character and you can be free from it too, because it has to be exhausting for you too. And it has to be hurtful to be met with such resistance constantly, because I know who I am and I know what I'm not going to stand for anymore.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of it is unconscious? Because sometimes I feel like I know the mask that I put on when I'm going to be in certain situations, and other times I just feel like it's just a very natural thing that happens. Like, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you feel like a lot of people, it's just very unconscious? Like, oh, I'm going to work. This is who I need to be today.
I call it autopilot. It's like when you've lived in something for so long and you've desensitized yourself to it and disassociated from it for so long that you literally go into autopilot, and it has to be a conscious choice to wake up in it.
Yeah.
And you have to, and again, these words conscious, you have to say like, this is not what I want. This is not what I want. This is what I have to do right now, but this is not my end game. This is not my end goal. And now I'm going to shift.
I think there's a lot of people are waking up. They're going through that. This is not what I want to do anymore. A lot of my clients that have come to me, I mean, a lot of what they're saying is what I said, over 20 years ago. I didn't know who I was. Who am I now? Who am I supposed to be? I lost my identity. Where am I going with this? Who am I really? And I think now a lot of people are going through this, waking up in this evolution of self where we're dissolving the ego. But, I think when you look back and you hit the nail on the head, we are remembering ourselves.
We are. And we're remembering, I was just going to say, as you were saying that, I was thinking it's the comparison. And that's when you know that you're about to be in an awakening or an ego death, is because you start comparing, there we go. Comparing yourself to who you used to be. You stop comparing yourself to the world. You stop comparing yourself to materials. You stop comparing yourself to these things that do not matter. You start comparing yourself to who you used to be and who you want to be. And that was the biggest indicator. And I lived in that comparison for a good 3 years before everything came crashing down. And I believe that if I would have chosen more consciously in those comparison phases that my life wouldn't have been a complete tower moment. It would have been more soft. It would have been more controlled. But I think because I ignored it and resisted and lived within that comparison for years leading up to 33, that's why it all came crumbling down, because you can't ask and for things and not receive. The universe has no budget. So when you start playing that game with spirit and you start playing that game with yourself, there comes a head to that pimple.
It's funny because my husband and I were just discussing this the other day, because I'm like, I don't think I'm really being clear with the universe. I say something and then all of these like people are influxed on me, like in the store, and I'm like, I think I need to be a little bit more clear about what I really want. And he laughed because he's like, it's really true if you don't say it specifically, like the way that you want it. Like, I don't want to be inundated with all these people's energies when I'm walking in the store. That's not what I asked for. And I was chuckling, and he's like, you got to be a little bit more clear. Like, that probably goes into your everyday life too. Like, maybe I'm not as clear with him. And so it trickles down into how am I not being clear with him or myself either? But before we finish up, I just want to know, it's been a great talk today. And I think we always hit it right on the head. You shared so much wisdom and insight. I think our listeners are really going to be able to dive into. But the ego's death, I feel like, is this soul's initiation into the truth. And it's into the truth of who you truly are on a soul level, and what you are here to learn, and why you're growing and evolving in this space. And especially now at the time that we're in. And we shared many insights with Keegan's life and my life and how they've interacted. And if you look back on it, I want you to sort of take a few moments today to look back onto, this remembrance of who you're becoming, but also who you were. Because when the ego does die, right, it's like any other death. There's going to be sadness. There's going to be anger. There's going to be fear, doubt. All of these things are going to start coming in. But it really is when you remember yourself. So I want you to, just before we finish up, share some of your great insight again is about how are we not losing ourselves, we're remembering ourselves.
Yes. When I did, this whole process of awakening has been a stripping. So I was stripped from everything. My husband was stripped from his job. So we were stripped from our security. We were stripped financially. We were stripped with health. We were stripped with support. We were stripped every possible place that you can imagine in life. And, I did that. I started comparing. And what I found was, when you live in loss, you can't see the gifts. But when you remember death, you remember that. I'll give you an analogy. If you have someone die in your family, you can choose to only tell the bad stories, or you can choose to only tell the good stories, because that person has died, right? So, for example, if I have a horrible matriarch in my family, and this is true for me, I have a horrible, horrible grandmother. Like, my parents' families were like night and day. I was born into duality. I say all the time. I had a grandmother that was a complete freaking angel, and then I have another grandmother that was an absolute devil. But I have a gift in her death. My gift was, and I apply this to my own ego deaths. My gift was, my daughter never had to know that woman, right? The only thing she knows about that woman is the things I decide to tell her. Why would I paint a picture to her that what came before her is horrible? I can choose to build upon the things that were really great about her. Her ego was so large that she intimidated most around her. And no, she didn't use her ego properly, but she still had a powerhouse behind her. And I carry that power. She carries that power. So I started applying that to myself and the parts of me that died. Am I going to constantly harp on the lower parts of me that had to die so that these beautiful parts of me can be born? Or am I going to respect and honor the beautiful parts that got me to the place I'm at and continue to build on that foundation instead of keep tapping back into the parts of me that I was before? And then I started applying that to people in my life. If you keep tapping back into the place that makes me feel small, then you don't want to build me. You don't want me better. You want me less than.
Yes.
And that part of me died. We're allowed to make mistakes. We're allowed to change our mind. And we're allowed to navigate this life finding the best version of ourselves. So if you take death as a hush puppy, then you can create from only the foundation in which gave you wisdom.
I love that.
And that is the most important part. So, yeah, you could have messed up. You could have made a lot of mistakes, but you wouldn't have the heart that you have if you didn't. You wouldn't have the soul that you have if you didn't. They were gifts. They were gifts to me to see who I really am and what I really can go through and what I really am capable of.
I love that. That is so beautiful. So beautiful. I love that. And I love how you put it. And it's absolutely true. And I just want to add that even though you're going through this, and it doesn't have to be you're all the way through it, you could be the light in the dark for other people. You know, Keegan and I have said, you know, at this final call to action today, if we spark something in you and you feel like you're going through this existential crisis, you feel like you're going through an awakening, an ego death, please reach out to others that you are finding that are like you, because chances are there are others that are like you. And most often we attract that mirror version. And so we're connecting with those people that are like us. But if you feel like you're ready to awaken, if you feel like you're going and you're ready to be deeper and look deeper into yourself, then you probably are, and it's probably time for you to begin. I want to thank you for joining us today. And Keegan and I are so grateful and blessed that you join our space every third Thursday. And I love that we're here to be able to co-create with you. So if you just want to shoot your messages, share our show, leave us some feedback. We'd love to hear what you guys want to talk about. We may even do like a question and answer show. I think may be good to come up. You guys come on and ask us some questions, or we have some pre-questions ready to go. And I'd love to do one like that with you, maybe with the holidays coming up as we're going through and experiencing this new shift. So thank you for joining us.
If people want to know more personal things, like, you know, it's not just the wisdom is not just there. It had to go through darkness first. And you have to strip yourself from the things you don't want. You might not know what you want right away. You have to eliminate what you don't want. So if you want more personal and you want to know the stripping away and what you didn't want so that you can feel like you're not alone, ask. I'm an open book. There's nothing in my life I'm ashamed of at this point.
Me either. That's why we're a perfect duo.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see you on our next third Thursday.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everyone.